I've been to 8 Olympics and 8 Pan Am Games and World Student Games and been Chief Medical Officer now a number of times. Following the Olympics, the IOC gave me, but it was really my medical team, the best ever award. There were 3 things I was going to add. I was going to design and build a mobile medical unit.
More accessibility quickly for the athletes,
I was going to bring in chiropractors.
I was going to ask that about that. The first time I think in any Olympics
ever. And
our profession owes you a lot of thanks.
And I raised $7.2 million of medical supplies that we needed to complete what I said we were going to do. Nike wasn't one of our sponsors. So I call Alistair, explain it, I need 500 uniforms.
Why did you want to do that?
Why? Because I worked with them. I was a doctor for the Grizzlies. I had a chiropractor. I worked with the Canucks. I had a chiropractor. For the first 4 years, it was just Cheryl and I putting on the what is now the Sun Run. We called it the Lionsgate 8 for 8 kilometers, once around the park, because the marathon was 5 times more. Well, that was my dream. You are away too much. Wow.
How did that make you feel?
Terrible. We had a great team, with the Grizzlies. That medical staff now is with the Raptors, so for the last 7 years at 40th.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Scrubs and CubeCast, a new and original podcast show. My name is Sarush. Please help me, join me as I go behind the scenes in the healthcare industry, where I invite professional healthcare providers, doctors, and therapists, where we learn about their original story. It's an opportunity for us to learn about their past, their ups and downs, their challenges, but at the same time, their success stories. More importantly, it gives us an opportunity to learn from them, and it gives us an insight into their perspective and what they want to pass on to the next generation of doctors and practitioners. Tonight is a special moment for me, a defining moment in my own career. I have a very special guest who has been a champion in the community, in clinical practice. His contribution to the community and medicine and clinical research has been profound and unparalleled. I've had the opportunity to work with him as a student, as a clinician, and now as a friend. His achievements are profound and long list, but some of the achievements I'll mention below. He's been the member of the International Olympic Committee Medical Commission from 2005 to 2010, Chief Medical Officer of the Vancouver 2010 Olympics and Paralympic Games, Chief Medical Officer for Canada at the Sydney Olympics. He's been involved with 2 Pan American Games. He's been a clinician for over 40 years, a co-founder of the Allen McGavin Sports Medicine Clinic, and a director of that clinic for 25 years. He's also been the team physician for the women's field hockey team for 25 years, and also the team physician for the Vancouver Grizzlies NBA team when they were in town. He's also a co-founder of Vancouver Marathon, co-founder of the Vancouver Sun Run. Very involved with clinical research. He's been involved with clinical and exercise medicine research in injuries, injury prevention, concussion in sports, and cardiac disease in athletes. He's a member and co-founder of Sports Cardiology BC. He's been involved with the establishment of the Chronic Brain Wellness Program at UBC. He's helped raise $3.5 million for Sports Medicine Center at UBC, including $1 million for cancer exercise program and another $1 million for chronic brain wellness program. He's an avid athlete. He's done, I think, over 60 marathons. He's won many awards, some of which include the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012 and the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Academy of Sports and Exercise Medicine. It's an honor for me to have him here. I'm still in disbelief that he even accepted to come, an hour and a half drive, 9 p.m., past his bedtime to be here. So it just shows, what kind of a man and a character he is. It's none other but Dr. Jack Taunton. Jack, It's a privilege to have you on the show.
Sarosh, it's an honor to be here. And the people that you've interviewed before me are outstanding, and I know a number of them very, very well. So this is truly an honor for me.
The honor is all mine, Jack, and such a privilege to have you, to learn from you, and to have a conversation with you. You know, I know you're such a busy man, and to be here, it's just an honor for me. So thank you so much. And before anything, I know you've been also dealing with some health issue. I just want to make sure you're healthy, everything is good on the go, and you're doing well.
Well, thank you. I've just completed 15 months of chemotherapy and immunotherapy for a pretty aggressive cancer, but I was very fortunate that 3 pharmaceutical companies in the United States developed this drug, which is a part of the immunotherapy, which I've been on for a year, and it has been shown with a 1-year study only, and they've published it in the New England Journal of Medicine, so it's a very prestigious journal. It's been certainly very effective. You get a host of side effects, but as of 2 weeks ago, with the ongoing monitoring of CAT scans and so on, that I've got no visible cancer and no metastatic spread. So I've been very, very lucky. Somehow I have been challenged with some pretty significant health, issues. I had polio when I was in grade 1. I missed virtually all of grade 1. I wasn't able to do any sports until, because I was paralyzed on the right side, I wasn't able to do any sports until I was 14. And then that year I started on a program, they had them at school, where you could chart your daily running, and it was a 100-mile club. That was very impressive for me, because I'd seen the Bannister Landy Mile being on at the track, and the first time of Sports Illustrated, and the first time sport had been broadcast for the Commonwealth Games in Vancouver. So I was very interested in running. Yeah. And that next year, I got hit by a car, and I had a fractured dislocation of my heel and my distal ankle. So I was in a cast for 32 weeks. So my brief start into sport, and then I went crazy. And
you went crazy.
I went crazy. I played football. I played rugby, soccer, and obviously ran. And
high-level running.
Was very fortunate to. I played on a very successful junior football team, and then I played for Simon Fraser, and I played soccer at Simon Fraser. All the coach said, "Jack, you can run. I just want you to go down the wing and cross the ball." So
you're just a fast runner.
That was my job. That was my job.
Position for you.
And then started, distance running, and started the first. 6 of us started the first running club in British Columbia, distance running club, and out of that, my job, since I named the club Lionsgate Roadrunners, my job was with my coach. We started the first Vancouver Marathon 50 years ago, and then my wife and I started the Sun Run and the Seawall Race, and now Cheryl and I put on pro-am bike races. So but just before cancer, I got a year of a chronic bone infection just from having a tooth that cracked. The dentist sent me to an oral surgeon. He tried to get it out, couldn't. It broke the mandible, so I got an osteomyelitis. And
infection of the bone.
The bone and the teeth. Yeah. I had 30 procedures in my mouth, and then it went to my shoulder, and I got an 80% cuff tear. And then it went to my stomach, and I got a hemorrhagic gastritis and had 19 transfusions. And then it went to my heart, and then to my spine. And I just thought, We're over this. I had a PICC line in with intravenous antibiotics every day, and I'm getting back to the point where I can get back to running and back to cycling, and which I did a lot of, and had gone to 4 Olympics with the cycling team.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know,
and you keep going.
The next
Nothing
guard,
stops you.
The next guard I got was the cancer. But with my poles, I walk 2 hours a day.
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah, you were telling me. And that's such a big theme, I think, of your life, of just keep going forward, right?
Well, that's what it's all about.
What it's all about. Well, I'm glad to see that you're doing so well and healthy, and I really appreciate you being here. You know, with we had multiple conversations, and you know, we weren't sure if this was going to happen, so it's an honor. Thank you so much, and glad to see you doing so well, and you look great. So
I got hair.
That's important.
Unfortunately for women, they get breast cancer. They get the chemotherapy that they get on, or immunotherapy, automatically you lose your hair. But I continued to keep my hair.
Keep your hair.
I've lost recently in the last month 10 teeth, and I got 5 more to come out because of the osteomyelitis in my jaw. But I got hair, and I'm still moving.
Well, you look great, and glad to see that you're doing so well, Jack. And thank you so much. Before anything, we get into your successful and illustrious career. I want to just quickly talk about what is sports medicine, like what is the specialty, and what is the clinical area of focus for our observers and viewers to know exactly what it is, because I think people just assume that sports medicine specialty is only for people that do sports or sports injuries. If you can maybe explain a little bit about that.
Right. Well, for us in sports medicine, just like with you, our patients are young, they're old, that they have conditions that affects their ability to mobilize, affects their ability to exercise. Mm-hmm. And the other is to understand the benefits of exercise. We now talk, you and I talk about exercise is medicine. And
the best form of medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so my master's thesis was on cardiac rehabilitation, the first program in the country. And I had a very progressive advisor for my master's at Simon Fraser. And at that stage, you couldn't exercise for at least 6 months to 9 months. You were bedridden. And we said, no, that does not make sense to us, but we had to prove it.
Because that was just a medical protocol for at that time.
Yeah,
right. And you have to have research to be able to back up that claim.
So we did the research. And in fact, the first night that we recruited 100 people. And the first night, and we were at Royal Columbian Hospital close to Simon Fraser, and I had 3 cardiologists that wanted to be a part of this. And I got a knock on the door as I'm just speaking to these 100 people that they're anxious about how they're going to do. And there's 3 police officers there, and they said, is Jack Taunton here? I said, well, that's me. And he said, well, I've got a court injunction here asking you to leave because the board of directors are afraid you're going to kill these people.
Wow.
So
court order.
So we moved it up to Simon Fraser. One of the cardiologists worked with me. A doctor from Student Health was very keen, and a tremendous nurse. They said, okay, we'll be your team. Mm-hmm. And we're going to divide that up into walk-run program, interval program, and they're only starting to do interval programs now for cardiac people, and then a basic walking program. And then we looked at these individuals to see how they did. And we had nobody die, and everybody, regardless of the exercise, improved. The ones that improved the most were those that had started with a basic walk-run program, and then we switched it into interval training. And that, adding that anaerobic stress
to the aerobic side.
To the aerobic side, that improved that group the most. And then we opened a clinic called the Preventative Medical Center downtown. And here we are, a group of my 6 of us were in the first graduating kinesiology class, including my wife. And so we opened this clinic downtown, and where we did cardiac work, but we did general exercise program, whether you're diabetic or are you overweight or are you an athlete and you've had an injury and we need to rehabilitate you. And that's where our team, with you and all our other therapists, we work together as a team. And so
that's how this whole kind of program of sports medicine was like the background of it started, right?
Right. And so 42 years ago, my own doctor, who had been an Olympic athlete, Doug Clement, and myself, opened the first clinic in Canada out at UBC. And that ultimately became at first it was the BC Sports Medicine Center, and it became the Terra Nova Sports Medicine Center. And we were seeing 1,100 patients a week.
Wow.
And it was referral only. They wouldn't allow us to look after the student athletes because they were afraid we were going to rob all the students away from student health. That has now changed this year.
Just 42 years later.
Yes.
Wow.
And we set up. And Doug and I had been meeting ourselves every Tuesday night after our track workouts, and we'd do our own seminars. What is shin splints? We had no bone scans in those days, but
kind of like early rounds, right? Just to kind of like discuss with.
It was round. It was just the two of us, and so then we started that. We offered a fellowship program for a doctor that had qualified, and he's worked with us right up until virtually today, Dr. Rob Lloyd-Smith. And so Rob worked half-time student health, seeing the 650 varsity athletes, and half-time with us. Now, Dr. Naveen Prasad, the director, and the other team, they look after the 650 varsity athletes finally.
That's through the Alan McGavin.
It's called
Alan McGavin Center
now, and
right?
people want to know, what is Alan McGavin? Well, the McGavin's family delivered bread to houses and to grocery stores.
Okay.
And McGavin Bakeries. 2 of their sons played rugby at UBC and played on the national rugby team. Well, we looked after them, and Dad and Mum were becoming more senior, but were very active. And so they would get overuse injuries, and we'd look after them. And they said, look, you're in this little tiny, well, we were in a trailer to begin with. And then we were in the Pizza Hut, as we called it, in the middle of the fields. And so he got his controller to go to all the stores, the Super Values, the Loblaws, the Safeways, and so on, and ask them to contribute. So we got enough donations. We got enough money to then expand that Pizza Hut.
Trailer Pizza.
And at that point, we really lucked out because the national soccer team was actually living there, and that's where you would go to get a towel or the soccer ball. But they were living there in preparation for the 1980 Summer Olympics. It did not happen because the Russians had invaded Afghanistan and they banned that games. So many countries, 99% of the countries, banned that game. So now the soccer team didn't have a purpose anymore. So they said, can we use that? Well, yes. We've left our practice in Richmond, where I did initially emergency medicine and family practice, and then sports medicine started to morph. And then once I added the marathon, and then we had the Sun Run, now we're inundated.
If official sports medicine, it's got a brand now.
That's right. And we would be up until 1 and 2 o'clock every night making ourselves orthotics for runners, and soft and semi.
Just like with material?
With material. And we would make them, and it would be a whole stack of, and then the Paris family came to us. Oh. And I can still remember the day.
Paris Orthotics, that's where it's.
Paul and Stephen, they came and they said, we know you're doing this, come from a family that build boots. And they were the #1 boot builder cork boots for the logging industry and for the fashion industry, and Pierre Paris. And so they said, we are now trained to be podiatrists. Could we take that over for you, and you can refer people to us? And that was the start.
Saved a lot of time for you.
That's
not
right.
Just stay up till 2 a.m. making orthotics.
And they were better orthotics than ours.
Well, professionally.
Yes, that's right. So that's how we started, and that helped me and Doug, because we were very interested in overuse running injuries.
Injuries, yeah.
And at that point, the largest study on overuse running injuries was of 80 runners from University of Oregon. Bill Bowerman, the early days of Nike. Doug had gone there. I had spent time there. So
that was the biggest study up to that date from
80.
80, that's it.
Our study that year was 1,680 runners, where we looked at their history. What did we feel was the causative factor, and where were the injuries, and what were the names? Well, iliotibial band syndrome. We ended up coming and
defining them and everything,
and looking, and we could see that it was associated with weakness, and that you now control, weak core and tightness and so on, and so that became the biggest study ever. And so I'd go around to the shoe companies, and I'd see in the R&D department, there would be a picture of our article from Sports Physician up on the wall, and they were...
In Canada, in Vancouver, starting from a trailer now.
Yeah, that's right. These companies would come up and they'd say, this is where you do your work.
That's crazy. So this was kind of like the basis of the sports medicine specialty, right?
Right.
At UBC, and then eventually you developed that into an actual specialty, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. And so we worked, and we're now a specialty with the Royal College of Family Practice.
Family Practice.
And so we started that program. We already had started with Rob the first year a fellowship program.
Yeah.
It was 2 years, and you did research and you did clinical, work. And we continued to add and work with physiotherapists, chiropractors, massage, and so on. The team of sports medicine is not just a doctor, but in our era, sports medicine was orthopedic surgery. So, and they hadn't started doing, one of the surgeons from out here, he was one of the early ones to do reconstructions of, anterior cruciate knee ligaments. But it was the surgeon.
The whole side of kind of like rehabilitation medicine was not really there as much.
No, not at all.
It was only like inline if you had to get to a surgeon, or the recommendation that he or she would make for any sort of like exercise, but just that was about it, right?
Yeah, and so we found some excellent physiotherapists initially that had developed a rehabilitation program. Doug and I had our own sort of walk-run program and strengthening program with an emphasis initially on running, and then we went to other sports. So,
well, that's fantastic. So one of the big legacies, one of the defining moments of you was establishing the sports medicine program,
right?
And being a founder. And I was going to ask you about some cool stories and gratifying moments in your career. So I guess that would have been probably one of the big ones. But if off the top of your head, if I ask you, what is one of the coolest stories that you have for all this long career of yours, what would be another one?
Well, people, I've been to 8 Olympics and 8 Pan Am Games and World Student Games, and been chief medical officer now a number of times. But I worked with, I was a coach. I coached the New Zealand marathon champion, went to the Olympics with him. So New Zealand had a Canadian coaching their number one, marathoner. And so we would work with our track team, and with that, with Lynn Kanuka now, Lynn started pool running, and we fostered a program for that. And then I would take because I cycled with the national team. They always had a bike for the dock, and so they would sit on my wheel, and I would, train.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a lot of running with them that I was training, and did a lot of rehabilitation with them. And so here we are. We're at the '84 Olympics in Los Angeles, and they're having the first women's distance race, 3,000. And the big race was Mary Decker and Zola Budd. Zola, South African, barefoot runner. Mary Decker, University of Oregon. But we had Lynn. Mm-hmm. And Lynn ultimately came third in 3 World Cross Country Championships. And Lynn is in that race. And she is coached by Doug, and I'm her doctor and rehabilitator. And so I know I'm there as a doctor. Yeah. And one of the sports I looked after was track. Obviously the marathon runners, but the track runners and the cycling team and so on. And I know Lynn is nervous. I'm nervous. So I said, Lynn, before the morning of the race, I'm taking you for a run. So I took her for a run, and I didn't tell her at the end of the run. Yeah. In the Olympics, they always had, in the Olympic Village, one of the things they had was a hair salon. And a famous international hair salon. So I went and talked to them, told them who I was and who I was going to bring in. And then we finished our run at the Sidell Sassoon Hair Salon. And both Lynn and I got our hair cut. And then we went for a cool down run. And then I said, Lynn, I'll see you after the race. 80,000 people. I'm in the stands with 2 laps to go. Zola Budd and Mary Decker trip each other up, fall. Lynn hurdles them. And then Lynn gets the bronze medal. Lynn has crossed the line, is leaning forward, looks up into the stands, sees me out of 80,000 people. She says, Jack, I like your hair.
That's just crossing. That's crazy.
And
that's a cool story. Yeah. That's a cool story.
Well, I've been to lots of games, but for me, that is one thing with an athlete that you and I have spent a lot of time working with, and and obviously being selected for 4.5 years to put on the Winter Olympics here, and then following the Olympics, the IOC gave me, but it was really my medical team, the best ever award. The award that put on the team that put on the best medical and anti-doping coverage for a Winter Olympics, summer, or Paralympics.
Wow, the International Olympic Committee gave that award.
IOC. And
you and your team.
And they gave me that award, and I shared it with them.
Of course.
But it was for me, and the awards, says it's for me, best ever. And they had a section of a tree carved out by a First Nation carver and elder from Tofino. He carved it out, talked to my daughter, who's the head of First Nations Art and Culture, and to see what they would, carve in that section of a tree. And he said, well, describe what this award's for. And she said, well, it's for my dad, and he struggles. He fights. And he said, okay, this will be a spawning salmon, and I'll carve into that an original Olympic torch. And they presented that to me. And every year since, the IOC contacts me because I advise the next CMOs. They contact me and say, Jack, you still have the award. So that was very special.
That is very special. It's an honor for me to be sitting next to you. It's such an accomplishment.
But as I said, look, you can't, this is done by a team. And
Yeah.
you know so many of them, and we worked together with that group with, Rick Celebrini and Jerry and so on. They all worked with me, for me, but with me. And we all worked together.
You're right. It's always as a team, without a team, you can't accomplish too much.
Before, we did things that they had never done. We made a mobile medical unit that had 2 ORs, 4 trauma beds, 4 ICU, 4 emergency beds, and on a platform of a 54-foot tractor trailer, and they made it. Vanoc said, "You'll never do it." I said, "I promised the Olympics I had to present," and they hired me 3 weeks before the Torino Games, and I had to present to the IOC what my anti-doping plans were and what my medical plans. And there I said there were 3 things I was going to add. I was going to design and build a mobile medical unit.
Have more accessibility quickly for the athletes,
I was going to bring in chiropractors.
I was going to ask that about that, the first time, I think, in any Olympics.
Time ever. And
our profession owes you a lot of thanks.
And we are going to have full imaging. So the first time we had MR, CT, ultrasound, and GE was just tremendous working with me.
Before that, there was no imaging done?
Well, they would be, they would have an X-ray, which were next to useless. And they they didn't have ultrasound, they didn't have an MR, they often would have an early CT. And then I gave to Whistler Healthcare a CT scan. That I was able to wangle out of GE, and I gave them 2 ultrasounds. And
these are expensive. Viewers that don't know, these are,
I ended
hundreds
up
of thousands of dollars.
Because we didn't have sufficient funds. I raised myself, and this is where I found that with these Olympic rings, they helped me, but I would phone people out of the blue, and I raised $7.2 million of medical supplies that we needed to complete what I said we were going to do.
To enhance the games and provide even better care for the athletes.
That's right, and expand the therapy, to have full dental coverage. They did 2,000 treatments, the dentists. And we had to...
wow. I guess they never even think about that, that could happen, right?
And we had to have a program for terrorism, because later on we saw what happened with terrorism at the Boston Marathon. We had to have... we had H1N1 pandemic. So I had to have the money to get the vaccinations, and Vancouver Coastal Health helped a lot. And we had to have disaster planning. The road to Whistler could be closed off, so I had to make sure I had helicopters. For
a lot of planning. Wow.
Terrorism.
Yeah.
I got contacted by the vice president of the United States saying, "We know there's going to be a lot of Americans coming to Vancouver. We don't think," they really didn't know, but we don't think your SWAT team, your army would be sufficient if there was terrorism. And Afghanistan had just been done.
Yeah.
So they said, "I am going to, for you, put 20 miles below the Canadian border, 5,000 SWAT team members that we've brought out of Afghanistan. And they're sitting there, they're going to train with your people, and literally," and everybody sort of jokes about this, "you're going to push the red button, and that tells those troops,
come in.
And they come in.
Of course, approved by the Canadian government.
We had to go through all that.
All the loop,
and all the hoops, and we had to change the rules for anti-doping so that Border Patrol could give information. There's a shipment that we've caught of anabolic steroids coming through Blaine border. But they couldn't tell the RCMP. So we had to go to Ottawa,
get the jurisdiction,
and get all that changed.
Wow.
And so Games had never done these kind of things, before.
So with all the, you said bringing on the chiropractors, the imaging, and then also setting new standards for the doping, did this set a new standard for
Yes.
the Olympics?
Yeah, totally.
Can you explain that a little bit and let us, so just
Well,
kind of continued
yes.
having these protocols
Yeah,
in?
and we had a base center in the polyclinic. Our polyclinic was 10,000 square feet. Then I raised another million for a 10,000 square foot gym, one
Yeah.
in Vancouver, one at Whistler. I made sure I had nutritionists to help the athletes and to make sure there was no food outbreaks. We ended up, I wanted to have sports psychologists. Well, and they fought me tooth and nail. And
Who fought you tooth and nail?
Bannock,
Okay.
because I was going to have 30 sports psychologists. And I said, the teams want them, the teams use them, just like the chiros, and we've got to step up, and we need them as a part of our team.
But they wouldn't agree.
They didn't, but I said, I'm doing it. And
Eventually you did it, but they were resistant.
They took 500 of my on-call physicians, additional surgeons, cardiologists, dermatologists, a whole host of people that if somebody at Whistler or the Olympic family got into trouble, we had physicians, surgeons that were on call and could be there within an hour.
So you had the whole spectrum of the medical community lined up.
Totally. And the reason was because they said that is going to cost us, $800 to $1,000 a person to get them a uniform and what have you. So they wouldn't budge. So I went to a good friend of mine that has a running shoe store.
Never like to hear no. Huh?
Phil Moore that has Lady Sport and Fit First and
I've been to a couple.
Yes, and so I said, I need uniforms. And remind me, Phil, who was our photographer of the marathon? And we knew his son, Alistair, was the head of apparel in Nike World. Nike wasn't one of our sponsors. So I call Alistair, explain it, I need 500 uniforms. And I went
because it was costing Vannock $1,000. But what kind of uniforms were they costing $1,000?
Well, it's summer, winter clothes and all that.
Jackets,
and the gloves.
Yeah.
I went to the Hudson Bay and got gloves for these five. They thought they'd died and gone to heaven to get the gloves. And so we had them all up at Whistler and gave them all their uniforms. And they were now a part of
So
us.
you got Nike it wasn't a sponsor at first, but kind of became like a indirect kind of sponsor.
Well, I ended up creating with marketing because we didn't have for the company that's going to give me all the mouth guards that we had to have, and all kinds of stuff that had to be donated for the ears, nose, and throat surgeon and their stuff, for the 10 dental chairs, and none of that was on the budget. So we created, myself and a marketing person, a description. IOC wouldn't give them the rings. You had to donate $3 million.
Yeah.
One of my sponsors did, Medtronics, and they gave me 250 defibrillators, and they gave me what are called life pack units, which go into our 44 ambulances, and they go for each venue. And they gave me that, and I said, I could get you as an Olympic sponsor. They said, Jack, we're very happy. I'd use one of their early ones in my master's cardiac rehab program. We're very happy to donate that to you. And then at the end of the game, I said, Bob, how do we ship it back to you? They said, Jack, they're yours. Create a competition across Canada for the defibrillators. So we gave them away. We gave the life pack units away. GE did the same with the ultrasound.
General Electric.
Yeah. That gave me the imaging equipment, and they gave me the CT scan at Whistler and the ultrasound. They said, Jack, we should be giving you a parking space up there for fighting and getting this stuff. And
how did you fight all of this? This is not easy to do, but I guess your name and your reputation, I think.
You just call them out of the blue. It's cold call.
That's crazy.
But we created a new marketing recognition called Friends of the Games.
Not sponsors, but Friends of the Games.
Friends of the Games. And then on the logo or the plaque that I had made up, on it, they would have their name, and they were, friends, and it made a significant donation to medical services. And then we had to do the same for the anti-doping.
So that became the new kind of standard for the Olympic organization. I want to ask you a question specifically about bridging the gaps, because one of the key moments in the chiropractic profession was the 2010 Olympics, where chiropractors for the first time were officially invited by the medical community under, your guidance and your vision, which was fantastic for us. I think for the longest time, the chiropractic community and the medical community had been clashing.
Well, I tell you, I took a lot of heat.
I want to learn about that.
From members of the IOC Games Group Medical Commission. They said, Jack, repeat yourself. I said, I am bringing in chiropractors for the first time inside.
Why did you want to do that?
Why? Yeah. Because I worked with them. I was a doctor for the Grizzlies. I had a chiropractor. I worked with the Canucks. I had a chiropractor. And I worked with these individuals. They came to our rounds. They became good friends, but were outstanding clinicians. And
you saw the importance of what they bring to the table.
Exactly.
And not just chiropractors, you said, like all different sports psychologists, right?
Sure. And at the end of the games, in terms of the sports psychologist, the head of VANOC came up to me. First time he had sort of really talked to me about the sports psychology, and thanked me so much, because the day before the games opened, we had a real tragedy. In the luge sliding center, a team from Georgia in Europe was killed.
Wow. And the day before.
The day before, and that could have made our team or broke our team. And we had practiced. I mean, the assistant chief medical officer and myself, Mike Wilkinson, we spent 2 weeks of our Christmas holidays at Whistler for the last teams that hadn't qualified, whether they be in skeleton or bob, 2 and 4-man bob, or in luge. And so this athlete, we had hospitalized him because he had 2 closed head injuries in that 2-week period. And then on the final day of practice, they just pushed it so hard. They were so high up on the bank, and you come off that bank, and then you have to fit yourself through about this wide and get your luge going straight ahead, and because you're pulling, a number of G-forces, and then to go up to the finish line. They came off, sailed right over us, and with our medical and trauma teams and so on, and tragically hit one of the power poles that was supplying all the lights for, we had to treat all the athletes because they're now afraid. This is the fastest track in the world at that point. And they had
in the Olympics so far.
Yeah, and the World Championships.
Yeah.
And so they all had to spend a lot of time training. And in many teams, they would start at the women's start and then go to the men's start. So you didn't have the high G forces. And, but we had to look after and do counseling for those athletes.
Of course, because they're traumatized,
right?
Yeah,
because we're starting tomorrow. And so I've got my paramedic team, BC Ambulance. We've got our own medical teams there. We've got to, treat them and all the workers that were there, and with concern about post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And they did so much work, those counselors, with just this one incident, and then they were very busy throughout.
Of course, yeah. So it just goes to show the importance of that multidisciplinary approach to all aspects of health, right? And you're a great champion of that. So from a chiropractic perspective, I want to thank you for doing that and helping our profession tremendously and bridging the gaps, because I think sometimes these gaps, unfortunately, are just politics.
Oh, no, they are. And there were some countries that were so against what I was doing, at first. And then at the end of the games, they came up to me and thanked me.
Well, it takes bravery and character to be able to do that. So, that's fantastic. I want to learn a little bit about your, before Jack Taunton become Dr. Jack Taunton, and learn to see, did you always want to become a doctor? What was your background and how did you become a doctor?
Well, I was very interested in rehabilitation because I'd had polio.
And medical conditions growing up.
And so I'd spent so much time in the hospital. It was a full, big hospital full of patients with polio. In the basement, they had a swimming pool. We didn't have enough physios in Canada. Vancouver.
When was this? What year was this approximately?
In 55. 56.
Yeah.
And so we had to bring in physiotherapists from Australia, from England, New Zealand, around the world.
Because I think physiotherapy was just becoming popular in Canada
right, exactly.
at that time, right?
So we brought these individuals in, and we had, every day I'd be taken down to the pool and try to get this right side of my body moving. And out in front, I had an iron lung because it affected your muscles of breathing, and you stop breathing.
Difficulty
and
breathing,
and that iron lung was right in front of my room. All the rooms had glass walls so they could see all around and see you. And they had that iron lung there, and that was a motivator to make sure every day you did your breathing, exercises, because all of us had some involvement of the breathing. But so I was very impressed, and then the rehabilitation went up for a long time, and then when I was 15, I had this fracture dislocation of my heel, my calcaneus in my ankle. And I was in a cast for 32 weeks. And then I had a ton of rehabilitation.
Like more than half a year.
Yeah. And so I was very dedicated and thankful to my therapists. And I always wanted to, and since I couldn't run, I couldn't do other things, I would want to help take out the water, or, help somebody off the field, or use a tensor and do ankle taping or whatever.
So it always became like passion through the fact that
so
many injuries.
I'd gone through this, but my dad was an accountant, and so he wanted me to do accounting. And I was dyslexic, and I'd had a tutor from grade 5. We moved to Victoria when I was in grade 3, and they were going to fail me in Burnaby because of the missing school with the polio and being dyslexic. They didn't even know what dyslexic was, but they knew I had very extreme difficulty. But my dad would sit every night with me and do your math table, and if you didn't, whack, and so on.
Back in the days,
that's right. And so when I finished, I was in Victoria until grade 12. And I had just, when I went from junior high school to high school, now I am going to play soccer. I'm going to play rugby. I'm running like mad. And I made my first team as a runner to come to a big trip, road trip to Vancouver, to what was called the Vancouver Relays. And so I wanted to continue my running and see what else I could do, and I love football and rugby. So I went to Simon Fraser as a charter student. So we were in the first years. And
for your undergrad,
and I did math, and I loved history. I wanted to find out, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then I got to finished my second year, and I'm struggling, particularly with math. And that's just when computers came out, the binary system came, and it was just foreign to me. And with another runner, we would study in the quadrangle every night till 2 a.m. And I heard about kinesiology. So I switched into
your major to
kinesiology. And you take 5 courses. I would take 8 a term to catch up to the class, and I did well, and still had my tutor, and I had my wife. I met my wife. I get pounded.
In undergrad,
I'm getting pounded 2 practices a day in football.
Yeah.
So I'd come up to this sports psychology, sociology course, and I knew who Cheryl was because she was one of the top outside shooters on the basketball team, which was a good team. And so I'd come in all beat up, and I'd sit beside her, and she took the best notes.
Oh.
And but the interesting thing was I had to learn how to study because of my dyslexia from grade 4 on. Cheryl, it all came natural. But when it came to the really big exams, she had trouble because she didn't know how to really study. So we were a pair.
You guys helped each other.
That's right. And then we got married as soon as when university finished, and we were like 21.
What year was that?
And that was, we got married in 79.
79.
And
wow.
So there I wanted to do a master's with Eric Bannister, who was a real world leader in training and so on. That's what we did the cardiac rehab. Cheryl did hers, doing electron microscopy on tendinopathy and effective diet and what have you. And then I got a job as the research director of the hyperbaric unit at VGH, and Cheryl would work with me there.
Once you finish your master's.
When we finished, well, in fact, I started doing that that was my honors thesis, was the effect of hyperbaric oxygen. I could run a sub 4 minute mile with hyperbaric oxygen, but couldn't otherwise, and because it prevents development of lactic acidosis. And so I started working there, and the head of cardiothoracic surgery, and they were just starting to do the training for open heart surgery. So I would scrub with the cardiac surgeon all the time. And
go into the surgery room.
Yeah, and Cheryl was continuing with the research there, and Bill Trapp said, "Jack, you got to go into medicine." And I was, look, I'm dyslexic, I'm shy, I'm running 90 miles a week, I got a beard and a mustache, and because I'm trying to make the Olympic team in the marathon, and but I applied, and particularly the one of the heads of anatomy, he was a dentist, and he would see me every day going to the gym and going for a run. Well, he was a runner. Somehow he saw something in me. And so
probably like the dedication and the commitment.
Yeah, that's right. So he would say, "I won't start to lecture until you get into the room." And I'd get in and sit in the top corner, and he'd put his hand up and he'd start to lecture. And I got the gold medal in anatomy and a gold medal in, I guess, each year in medicine. And not the other students were a hell of a lot smarter than I was, but I could study.
Hard worker, know
work.
how to study.
Yeah, and I was still, and you know, what are you going to do for your spare time? I'm going to run. And so...
And that's how you've always kept being very healthy and strong, right. And that's been your...
And I did my residency, then I called it in, at St. Paul's. And every day, Cheryl was working at the hyperbaric unit. We had a little baby, KT, Kristen. And so I would run every day from St. Paul's Hospital to Steveston, where we live. That's 15 miles.
Richmond.
Every day.
Wow. 15 miles. Wow.
And so on my days off, you work 48 hours on, 24 off or whatever. I would be...
During residency.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so people can understand.
Yeah.
So 48 hours on residency, 24 hours off.
And so Cheryl would drive me, and like one we did was the biggest marathon on the West Coast was in Seaside. And it rivaled Boston and so on, and it was a big marathon. And so we would drive down. I'd run the marathon, get in the car, and she would drive me back. And they'd say, "What did you do on your day off?" And I wouldn't want to tell them because they'd think I was totally, nuts. They knew I was possessed. But,
so Cheryl has been with you all along.
All along.
Side by side, partner in crime and everything.
Yeah, when we started, they didn't have a distance running club in the city. And so I talked to 6 of them and said, we'll start a distance running club. And I ended up naming it Lions Gate Roadrunners because we would run by the Lions Gate all the time. And so they said, okay, Jack, you open your mouth. Your job is to put on the Vancouver Marathon. That was the first one. That was 50 years ago. And then Cheryl and I put on for the first 4 years, it was just Cheryl and I putting on the what is now the Sun Run. We called it the Lions Gate 8 for 8 kilometers, once around the park, because the marathon was 5 times around the park.
So now the other one is the Vancouver Marathon. This one is the Sun Run.
Sun Run, and then out of our club we also started a race that survived right up until COVID, and it's called the Seawall Race. And then
that's crazy.
And then they have a series of bike races called Super Week with Gastown and what have you. So Cheryl and I put one on. It was called the UBC Grand Prix. UBC didn't seem particularly interested in, despite the fact I've been there for 40 years and would never give us a break. So we got a great community, and it's the POCO Grand Prix. And I coordinate the medical for the Delta road race.
So when you say you put these on, like, were you like volunteering your time and just like organizing an event?
Getting all
people out,
getting all the sponsors, getting
the calls,
getting the police, getting the ambulance.
I need to learn from you. Like, how are you doing this? That's crazy! Wow,
and
that's
and bring in good people, And the fellow who's the head of Super Week, he was a student of mine, and he was a pro cyclist, and I was his doctor. And so, I'm saying, look, we need another race in Super Week. And Mark, will you join forces with me? And we'll, put on the one out at UBC, which I thought was going to be a very successful race. It was successful, but it was constantly running into challenges with the UBC administration. So I said, we advertised, and the mayor from West Van came over. They were very interested. Richmond, but Richmond couldn't put it on because they were doing so much building around the Oval, but POCO was outstanding. So we've got a team of, and then since then, I put on, and I've got a team with a manager working with me, and we're all volunteers, 30 people. So we put the medical on for the Harry Jerome meet. We put it on for other Super Week races. We put it on for the Fondo, the Fraser Valley Fondo one. And so for students that want to do sports medicine in any sort of fashion, because I've got chiros there. I've got massage therapists there. I got physios there and doctors. And this is an opportunity for you to get involved in a very professional. We've got an ultrasound with a radiologist.
Wow.
We see, point of care coverage. Somebody goes down. Is that a spleen or is that just a bruise? Or, if they ruptured, is that tendon that they've had for so long and been treated for so long, nobody's done imaging. We do right then and there an ultrasound.
Wow.
And it's one of the ultrasounds that I gave to St. Paul's and one to UBC that we have from the Olympics. And so...
That's so inspiring. It just goes to show that when you do good work and it's so genuine, it's from the heart and giving back to the community, so many people come together with you and appreciate that and want to help out.
Oh, yeah.
And that's maybe a key point for the next generation.
Oh, yeah. And at the same time, we have a number of students, and I've seen those students now go through kinesiology, then may do a master's or apply and get into medicine and then come back and do a fellowship and can be working with us or in another clinic. And you had Tanya here.
Tanya Cabrita, Dr.
Right,
Cabrita,
and she did her fellowship, with us in sports medicine. But she would come out and work with us on the drone meet or whatever. And during this time, 3 of us opened up a clinic in Uganda, and I raised enough money.
In 2016, right?
And I raised enough money to give Uganda their very first ultrasound.
Very first?
Very first.
Diagnostic ultrasound machine.
Yes. And and then we'll take therapists and we'll have students. And we did a study there, and we found that over 50% of the general population had musculotendinous injuries that they were putting up with. And but with ultrasound-guided injections or other treatments, we could see what the heck it was. And
just so that our audience know that a lot of these moments are just your time volunteering and doing this and giving back to the community.
Yeah.
Why so much? I just want to know, what is the reason for so much giving back to the community service, volunteering your time? What do you get out of it, and what's your message to the next generation?
Well, because I've trained a number of people, and this is an opportunity for them to get involved. And I've got 8 medical bags in my garage. Now I've pushed 5 of them out to the clinic at Allen McGavin, so I got 3. And so we can put on an event at a moment's notice. But I can help, people that are interested. And they could be students and become first responders. I started 42 years ago or something or other, Sport Med BC. And there you can become a sport first aider. You can become a first responder. We started, the head of cardiology and myself, Sport Cardiology BC, and to look for conditions that are asymptomatic but could, you could be reading about you in the paper the next day. A young rugby player dies. And
because they don't have any symptoms, but
exactly.
they have an underlying condition.
And we've just studied for 5 years, 750. And so we've had a number of students go through that. Well, they have to become first responders to work, with us. So they've got to know how to use a defibrillator. I gave away 250 of them. You've got to know CPR. And with that helps you if you're applying to get into a professional school or medicine. And so
it's always about giving back so that people can get better and succeed, right?
Right. I mean, to be honest with you, I got paid to look after one sport, and that was the Grizzlies. That was the first time after.
And people don't, it's important for people to know that, as I said, a lot of these are not paid jobs and times that you're putting away.
Yeah, and you're doing something for the community. And I mean, I wanted to make the Olympic team as a marathon runner. In the Olympic trials, I was 3rd with a mile to go, and then I got heat stroke and fell down 12 times and what have you, in front of my family and what have you. But I finished. But I didn't make the Olympic team.
I've never seen
And so many of my friends have. I've run with a lawyer that lives over here. He and I have run 70,000 miles together. And he got medals at Commonwealth Games and been to the Olympics and so on. Well, that was my dream. Wanted to show that some kid that, had polio and so on, and had a number of people, really worked hard to get me recovered. They, were behind me, and I constantly think, I failed because I never made the Olympic team. I've now made it backdoor by being a doctor at 8 Olympics, looking after the field hockey team, the women for 30 years and 20 for for the men. I was lucky. I saw my daughter play 128 games for Canada. And but I wanted to contribute. And that contribution came with CHASM and the organization that looks after sports medicine and doctors, and to be with the Olympic Association. And I could do that, and it's an accomplishment, it's a thrill, but it's not like being there as an athlete. So I went as a coach, and I went as a doctor, but never made the team.
But the work you've done and what you're doing is so inspiring. Like, just me listening to you and all the work that you've done and how, dedicated you are, relentless, and just moving forward. It's such an inspiring thing. I'm just learning every time I talk to you, like how you just accelerate forward and go forward and go forward. Wow, that's really surreal. But in terms of doing all of this work, like, how do you find the time to do it? How do you have the energy? And does it come at a cost?
A cost? You talk to my 2 daughters. They're super accomplished. An orthopedic surgeon and the head of First Nations art and culture at a university. She's this year raised $19 million in research. Mm-hmm. This year I've raised just recently, $2.2 million for the chronic brain. And I'm not a fundraiser, but, there were things that I missed by being away with a team, with games, with my daughters. I tried to get to as many things that I could, but I did miss things.
Because there's only enough time, right?
Yeah, and Cheryl made up, for that. But I can remember coming from a long tour, and I would always have one bag just loaded with my guilt, with gifts for the 2 girls. And my daughter, the youngest one, she is, Carla would have been about 8 years old then. And I come into the house, and I'm going to I would always bring the bag in and open it up and give them stuff.
Some stuff from the games.
Because I've been to Kuala Lumpur, and I've gone around and got clothing and toys and all this kind of stuff. And Carla said, before we open that, and this is an 8-year-old, Dad, you piss me off. This is my 8-year-old. You piss me off because you are away too much. Wow.
How did that make you feel?
Terrible. And so I, had to adjust things, and so, but I still, and with the Olympics, I was away. You're
probably,
that's 4 years of 14 hours, away, 15 hours a day. But Cheryl was outstanding. Cheryl says, I won't see you. So I'm going to be the director, the administrative coordinator of the Polyclinic in Vancouver. KT was doing her fellowship. She said, Dad,
That's your daughter.
My daughter.
Yeah.
She said, you need another trauma surgeon at Cyprus. And you need another doctor to work in the Paralympics with sledge hockey. And so she took time off to come and, work with us. And, the stuff that we saw was like when Kristen was at Cyprus with, aerials and freestyle skiing, we had a Norwegian athlete that I had to make sure did well because his dad was the head of the IOC Medical Games group. And his son came off a mogul and landed on another mogul and ruptured his aorta.
Oh, that's...
How long do you live? We had practiced and practiced. We had a helicopter, ready. We were ready, and we got that individual to Lionsgate.
That's within minutes. You got to...
Oh, you got...
Not
and
even
he was
2 minutes.
and they were able to stint this ruptured aorta. He came back the next year and competed for Norway. And we all were so panicked, seeing him.
But gratifying moment though to be able to do that, and then.
And I like for my time with field hockey for 10 years.
Yeah.
I was so fortunate that I was on the bench for every one of my daughter's international
That was
games.
a bonus.
That was a bonus.
Doesn't happen always.
And I was just Dr. T to her and Dr. T to everybody.
To everyone.
And so I was very lucky. They gave me the right to be able to do that. That certainly affects your practice. That costs you a lot of money by being away. But
your private practice.
By private practice at Allen McGavin. But all of us, our rule was, if you come to work for us, you've got to work for a team. And I was working with the men and the women's field hockey team, and then the Grizzlies, so I couldn't do them all. So I talked to Naveen Prasad, who's now the director. He started his fellowship with us, and I said, Naveen, you're Indo-Canadian. I need a doctor to go with the men's team to a big world tournament in India. And I called it hockey. Naveen comes to me at the end of the day. I didn't realize that India plays ice hockey. I said, no, sorry, this is field hockey. And he has been, up until this last year, the doctor for the men's team. And I'd spell him off now that I've retired with my certain challenge.
So the cost is time with family, time with private practice. You got to give something up, be able to have so many achievements and do all these, especially if you're traveling a lot. But at the same time, I think you make a fantastic example of how you get so many people involved together. You're a champion of that, and making it work.
Yeah, you do. You do make it work. And we made sure that we had a great team. With the Grizzlies, that medical staff now is with the Raptors. So for the last 7 years at 40th, we had preseason camp with the Raptors with my medical team, and they were the strength and conditioning coach. He was our manager. He was the equipment manager, and his family lived 4 doors from us in Richmond. And Johnny Lee, and now Johnny's the head of strength conditioning. And
everyone in your life is now like it's just like a spiral effect.
I can give back and do that.
That's fantastic. It's such an inspiring thing. And I've never seen anyone in my career that has done so much as you, and just always striving to go forward. A little background story. I don't know if you ever remember, but I worked at the Allen McGavin clinic. Oh, you remember?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, as an admin staff, like a front desk person.
I know.
And I remember the first day that you walked in, I'm like, oh, I got the great Jack Taunton. I kind of like, someone's in. And I came and talked to you, and I said hello, and I introduced my name. And then months went by because you were so busy. And then you came and you said my name. I'm like, Sarush. I'm like, oh, he knows my name. And he gave me a couple of, I think, Canucks tickets.
Yes.
And so that was I never forget that. So I always remember.
That was one thing. I mean, I could always get Grizzly tickets or Canucks tickets, and then I would try to support my friends.
Well, I really appreciate it. So that always stood in my mind, like, oh, such a, well-known person, doesn't even need to say hi to me, but you said hi, we shook hands, you remember my name, you gave me the tickets, and then years later when I became a clinician, I worked at Fortius, professional, and now we're sitting here, as friends, and I really appreciate. And so that was a really touching moment for my career and my life. What is the legacy of Jack Taunton?
The legacy. Well, I hope people realize that the sports medicine clinic, we have expanded now with $1 million that I raised, a cancer rehabilitation program, and that was for my partner, Don McKenzie. Mm-hmm. And now we have a chronic brain program for Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's, mood disorders, and people with chronic concussion. And I did that with a friend, Silky Cresswell, and the top neurologist for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And we've got IMS, there. We've got imaging there with ultrasound. Mm-hmm. And that I have been fortunate with our team to have, through the fellowship program, the head of sports medicine in Edmonton, the two which shared the directorship of the sports medicine program in Calgary. Mm-hmm. One is recently retired, but they were trained, with us. The director of the sports medicine program in Winnipeg, a good friend of yours and mine, who was a grad student of mine, Chris McLean, is now at Dalhousie. Mm-hmm. And so we look, and another one's in Toronto and so on. We look across the country, of people that we have been able to work with, to educate with, mm-hmm. to work on research with, that they have been a part of us, and I'm so proud of them. I look at the NBA, and there's 5 physiotherapists that have worked with us either at Fortius or at the clinic, mm-hmm. and so on. We've got Rick Celebrini, who was my head therapist for 2010. I was on his PhD committee. He is Golden State. And that team are virtually all Canadians. So they... Yeah,
with Jerry Ramajida, I had him on the show.
Yes, right.
Chiropractor, yeah.
And they invited me down because they all have come from soccer and Whitecaps and hockey, but had never done basketball. So I could go down and work with them in terms of basketball. Now they've got a female physio that was the top basketball player at SFU. She was the MVP of NCAA Div 2. And Danny became a physio, did sports physio, spent time with us and with Alex McKechnie with the Raptors in Toronto. And so she is another Canadian there.
Working with the New York.
And so Danny is with Rick. And to see those people that I have worked with, hopefully I have had some influence with them.
A lot of influence.
But, they keep in contact, and that is, such a thrill. I talk to Rick once, at least every week or every second week, and watch, his family just tremendous out of North Vancouver. His son will be the number 1 draft choice this year. Connor Bedard last year. Aiden, his oldest, is just signed with the Canucks.
Wow.
His daughter, 14, she's just signed with the Canadian junior tennis team.
Wow.
Charlie. And then he's got a younger one that's on a top hockey academy. And I've known them since they were born.
Tiny. So your legacy is multi-generational across so many fields, and so many people are thankful. including myself, So, and I want to appreciate the fact of, with your accomplishment, I just want our audience to know how humble and how approachable you are. Even like a quick text message, you respond back within 2 minutes, and it's just an honor and it's a privilege. So,
well, thank you.
There's not too many people like yourself, Jack, and I'm very appreciative.
No, I've whatever I've done is with the support of Cheryl, my wife, and my family, and they have helped me. And we may be involved, and I'll be calling you. We'll find out in 2 weeks with a new games, which he's going to be here in Vancouver. And so, and I'm working. 3 of us are. I talked to the architect today. We're looking at putting in a complex in Taunton with 3 ice rinks, a basketball facility with the fellow that put the track on our roof, and I've known for a long time, and with his other half that put in gyms, and so we don't have enough ice for my grandkids, and so and they are super athletes, like the mother.
Yeah.
Not me, the mother, with Kristen and that.
Runs in the family. Jack, the last part of our segment is a question about looking back now at your career. And if you go back in time, the question is, would you have pursued the same career? If no, what would you have done differently? If yes, what would you have done? And what would you have said to the young Jack Taunton to do differently?
Well, that's not too hard for me to answer, because when I started, and I wanted from the beginning, and I convinced my doctor that we would open a clinic, but that was in the realm and the control of orthopedic surgeons. And so I was accepted into an orthopedic surgeon fellowship program. They called me twice. Jack, we've had somebody cancel. Will you join us? And, I had a baby. Later on, I had another one on the way. And, I just couldn't afford it, to be honest. And the other thing that conflicted with, I was almost through a PhD program. I'd done the research with hyperbaric oxygen and so on, but I was going to it was supposed to be an MD PhD program, but I was in the first years. They hadn't really thought that out. So what it meant was you had to finish your medical school, your 4 years, and where you've incurred a fair amount of debt. And then I was going to be another 1 to 2 years to finish
the
PhD. And I just couldn't, do it. I had bought a house. We were in a condo in the West End. And we bought a house, a townhouse, in the first townhouse development on the dike in Steveston. And so I had financial, responsibilities. I owed Cheryl that. She put me through medical school. And I wasn't going to have her continue to put me through. She volunteered for 15 years to be the director of recreation for Richmond, and ran pre- and postnatal exercise stuff. But I wasn't contributing financially. So I said, I cannot. I will do other research. And, all told, other schools would probably, give me a PhD ultimately with all the research stuff that we've done collectively. But especially, the orthopedic surgery. And I trained with the orthopedic surgeons. So I brought 2 of them in, and I told them I was opening a sports medicine clinic. And we were going to build it in Richmond, next door to my partner, Doug Clement's house. And he was one of our partners. He had 6 children, tragically lost his wife. He married another woman that had 6 kids, 12 kids. Obviously, big house, indoor, outdoor swimming pool, and all these rooms. And Dick would say, Jack, I know you want to build a clinic, so you can take my house. And so we got it going through the rezoning, and then the medical school heard that you've been having doctors come out, and the dean of medicine, the head of what was called, it was human kinetics, became kinesiology, and the head of family practice. They asked us, Doug and I, whether we would move out to UBC. To accomplish that and to accomplish sports medicine, which in our minds we understood it, but we needed to learn more, and the only way we were going to do that was by research and teaching. Yeah. And so I said, I will give up, my dream of being an orthopedic surgeon and will become a new doctor, a sports medicine doctor. And didn't realize how long it was going to take us to get a fellowship, or not a fellowship, a true specialty, but that was, if I could have done it all over again and I had a lot of money and I didn't have to have Cheryl go through, but I would have not accomplished a lot of the other stuff that I have done. And so I live now every day. KT, Kristen, what'd you do today? You did 5 cases. What were they? And so on. And so I try to keep up by talking to her, and I drive her nuts, And what keeps me young? My 6 grandkids. It's just, and to see them develop
and get older. Well, Jack, I think that's a fantastic place to leave off and finish talk. It's an honor and privilege for me to have you here. Thank you so much. And thanks for being on Beyond the Scrubs.
Oh, it's an honor for me.
Thank you so much.
No, seriously. And for the team that's put this together. You guys are just amazing. And you get an award just to listen to me ramble on.
No, it's an honor. It's just it's such an inspiration, and we learn so much from you every day.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thank you
very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.